I'm Chip Clawson, and this is my show, Figments of the Imagination. And I've had great joy in producing this work. I come from the industrial background of Pittsburgh, heavy industry. My father was a machinist in Westinghouse, large rotating apparatus, big stuff. I worked at GE building locomotives, the first 5 feet and the last 5 feet, for only a short while. But that scale thing is really important to me. And what I do is I combine creativity with my ability to build. And I'm driven to do that. And I can do that because of my father, because he taught me how to figure out a problem, to solve a problem. And it's a great skill. And then I've built on that over time, and I need to make stuff. And this is what I make. How did I get here? Why do I make this stuff? Well, the forms go back to clay. But what's in this show is fairly new to me because I moved to digital technology about 4 years ago. I first became aware of the possibilities of digital technology and my work 15 years ago when I was actively pursuing public art. There was a large atrium, and I made these clay models and I put them on site using Photoshop. I pretty much knew I wasn't going to get it because it was a lot more money than any other public art I'd had, but it I really like suspended stuff. So I went to a ceramics conference and I was talking to someone who I did business with, and I showed him some photos of taking these models, scaling them up by carving rigid foam and covering them with Bondo. What a bad idea that was. Anyway, he said, you know, if you send your models off to this company my daughter works for in Austin, Texas, they can scale them up for you. So I called them, having no idea what the process was. And I said, I understand you can scale them up. And how big can you take them? He said, my warehouse is 200 feet long. I said, I'm not quite ready to go there. So anyway, I ended up sending him a 10-pound, 11-inch model. It came back to me at 44 inches and 7 pounds, and it lightened my wallet quite a bit. But wow, so I realized that, you know, here, this potential of scaling up stuff is fantastic. And also I learned that there are multiple materials and ways to do that. So I tried to get involved, but I needed technical support. I needed access to machines. In the fall of 2020, myself and a couple friends were sitting around a fire and talking, and one of them had taken my jobs at DeBray, and DeBray had purchased these digitally controlled machines. The other one was Chris Ricardo, who was the director of the Holter at the time, and he said, well, I got real excited, and he said, why don't you apply for a show at the Holter? So then I went to Steve Lee, the director of the Archie Bray, to ask if I could have access to the machines. He said yes. What I do to scan is I have a near laser scanner, and the Bray had a much better one. And so I would take a clay model, scan it, then I take it into a modeling program. And in that modeling program, I can stretch it and squeeze it and bend it and do all sorts of things. But also I can cut them up and put them back together. I can put multiple files in there and I can combine them. And the pieces over here are examples of a lot of combination. The pieces on the walls have been manipulated and used in different ways and different scales. So, you know, I'm 79 years old, and I didn't grow up with digital technology. You know, when I went to college, we used punch cards, and the computer that's in my pocket as a telephone is probably the size of this room. So it's been a huge challenge to me. I've come along with the technology a little bit, but when I got into this, which is really dependent, it's been very frustrating. It's been stressful. It's been rewarding because I'm able to do what I envisioned and hoped I could do, and even more, because when I started, I didn't know the possibilities. Why did I take on this challenge? Well, it's a part of my nature. You know, I'm not afraid of a challenge, whether it's a physical one in the out of doors or it's this one that is bending my head. And this piece right behind me is one of the few narrative pieces that I've made, but the base is ceramic, and then the head is a scan of my head, which I stretched in a modeling program, and then I put a circuit board in the top to show that how technology has stretched me. I grew up in Pittsburgh, which I mentioned before, and that really had a big effect on me. Then I went to college. I was educated to be a teacher. I student taught, decided I didn't want to do that. I went into Marine Corps, into aviation, ended up as an air traffic controller. And when I got out, I'd had a paradigm shift in the Marine Corps, and I would be working with all ex-military controllers, and instead of wearing a brown shirt and brown tie, I'd be wearing a white shirt and a blue tie. I'd be in the same environment. I don't learn really quickly. But one thing that did come to me while I was in undergraduate school, even though I wasn't an art major, was clay. My roommate, Ed Everly, was making pots. I liked what he was making. George Ferguson, a ceramics instructor there, allowed me to come in the evening and learn how to throw in exchange for mixing clay. So that's what started me down the road to ceramics. And when I got out of the service, I decided I was going to try to make a living as a studio potter. That was quite a bit of naivete, but I ended up back where I went to undergraduate school and spent 4 years there with a few classes, but mostly setting up a studio, doing other work, going to GE to build locomotives, to keep myself alive. And from there, I went to Ann Arbor. One of my other ceramics instructors helped me make a connection there. I became the tech at the University of Michigan in the ceramics department. And I met Kurt Weiser there, who was a graduate student. He was asked to apply to be the director of the Archie Bray Foundation, and he said they want somebody else to run this clay business. Are you interested? I came to Montana, and because I thought I wanted to be where there's a lower population density, and I was absolutely right. That's 47 years ago. Why is it important to make it? Okay, for me, I need to do it. It's my creativity. And what do I hope to accomplish with that? I want to engage a person's imagination. What do they see here? Where are they at? And then the other part of it is that I use a very bright palette, and that creates a joyful and, I believe, inviting environment for people. And we all need to have joy in our lives, and I hope that that's what I can achieve with my art. I created this show in the last 4 years. In January of 2021, I started down a digital road. It was a big step, but I was so fascinated with it, and I started with making larger stuff, which is in the other gallery, not in this gallery. because I had access to a 4x4 CNC, which is computer numerically controlled router. And I could make something that's 8 feet long and suspended, and it weighs 20 pounds, you know. And so it just, that grew. I also learned how to use a 3D printer. But then after 2 years and my first show of this work at the Holter, I then did not have access to those machines. So I purchased my own 3D printers, and what's in this room is all 3D printed with the exception of the base of the challenge. And I now have 3 of them, and keeping them operating is a challenge. People say, well, isn't there somebody that can repair it for you? No, it's me. And then it came up here and had a wonderful crew to help me install this, which is 6 days for me. I had 3 people from the museum. They were wonderful. And then I had 4 friends that came up that gave me 3 days each, tiered a little bit. So without the help of all those folks, you know, Nicole and Natalie and Jamie were great to work with, and it's been a very good experience for me. I'm inspired to make this work by the natural world. I have spent a lot of time in the out of doors, and it sinks in, and then the forms come out in a different way. I call them polymorphs. I don't know exactly where they come from. Occasionally I do, but generally I don't know that. So that's one base part of this. But then there are several architects and artists that have influenced me over the years, and this relates a lot to the larger work, but it started with Henry Mercer in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. He had the Moravian Pottery and Tile Works, and he burnt the first one down. And then he inherited the family farmhouse, and he cast it in concrete. And then he mounded dirt on the top of the scaffolding, put carpet face down on the dirt, laid his tiles face down on the carpet, poured concrete all over the whole thing, then removed all of that. And in his home, Font Hill, he had these wonderful, very rustic dome ceilings with his tiles in them. There were other things that I took from Mercer about making tiles, which I did earlier in my ceramic career. And so one of more recent visits, which is now 15 years ago, I saw this sag, and it took me quite a few years to figure out how to bring it into my process. But it started with the inspiration by Henry Mercer. Okay. The other inspiration from Henry Mercer was that he built the Mercer Museum, where he collected what he called the tools of the nation makers. And he believed his first exhibition of these they were hung from trees. Then in the building, in the center, he has a spiral staircase that goes around the outside of the building. And in the center, he suspended large objects like a whaling boat, a huge cider press, a Conestoga wagon, and a lot of smaller items. This took a while, but it really sat with me. And so he was one of my major influences. Antoni Gaudí, who was an architect in Barcelona, Spain, was another person. And I went there to visit his work, and we both love the curve. And so when people see my work, they think of him. My work is different. I'm not making his, but I'm inspired by him. The third major inspiration is Edward James. Edward James was the son of very wealthy aristocrats, and his mother was an illegitimate daughter of King Edward. I think it was 8, it might be 7. Anyway, his father and his uncle were very wealthy and left him a lot of money. And he was a patron of the Surrealists. He and Salvador Dali would throw these parties on Edward's money. And Dali said about Edward that we all are trying to be surrealists, but he's the real thing. So in the late 40s, he was going to build an orchid garden in LA and decided there were already too many people there. So he bought a coffee plantation 200 miles north of Mexico City in the jungle and in the mountains. And by 1964, he had 30,000 orchids. It snowed and killed most of his orchids. So he decided that he was going to build a garden that the weather couldn't kill. So he started building large concrete architectural buildings that are non-functional. The house that's 3 floors, but it's really 5. Anyway, the structures are just fantastic. And so when I was there visiting, my traveling partner said, when Chip arrived at Las Posas, he had an out-of-body experience because it was just so wonderful. He was not using fabric formed concrete. Between 1964 and 1986, he had between 40 and 100 men working for him, building the forms. They used saws and hatchets and nails, and they built between 32 and 200 sculptures, depending on how you count. What I took from him was a density and a non-functional spaces. I like to work alone. It's just the way that I work the best, you know. It's not like I'm in isolation, but yeah, my current studio is surrounded by a cabinet shop. Okay, so I interact with those guys, but when I'm working, my door is closed and I focus, and that's what works best for me. What is the most important aspect of my work? I think it's to create a joyful, positive environment, because as I'm thinking about that, I'm looking at the work on the wall that I'm looking at and what it brings to me personally. And that's what's important, is to get into people's heads, to engage their imagination. Community engagement is important because what I'm trying to do is engage people's imagination. And if the people don't have the opportunity to see my work and come and be immersed in it, then I can't achieve my goal of engaging their imagination and bringing it in. And so I think this video will actually be a good opportunity for people to get a little more understanding of me and what I'm trying to do, in addition to engaging them. Because the question always comes up, how did you make that? And in my first big show of work at the Holter, which is my home community, most of those people know me from ceramics and thought that this work was ceramics. I, I find that very funny. The reason that I want this work here at Paris Gibson Square is that it gives me an opportunity for a wider exposure. I want more people to see my work and hopefully enjoy it and engage with it. And so this is another community that I have very little engagement with prior to coming here. And I would also like to add that it's really been wonderful working with Nicole here as the curator and Natalie as the preparer and really the person that helps get all this stuff up. And Jamie, who is a curatorial assistant, who worked well with Natalie for suspending all this stuff. There's 200 pieces suspended in this room. How do I want to be remembered? Well, my work is a part of it, but so is my personality. I want to be remembered as a positive person that cares about community, cares about our country, cares about the people that are looking at my work. And yeah, I'm coming towards the end of my life. I'm 79. I'm in good health. But, you know, this is what I think one of the most important contributions that I've made is the work that I create. It's also my interaction with other people. And this is a way of interacting with more people.